So the first thing I want to talk about is division. So, there are really, three, actually there are three types of main governing bodies that run college tennis. So one is the NCAA, which is the biggest one. Then you have uh, the NAIA, which is which is another set of governing bodies, and I'm going to go through that in just a bit. And then you have something called junior colleges, right? So the junior colleges, there's really two organizations that run it. For the practical purposes, we're going to cover NJCAA, right? That's the biggest one, and there is also another one in California. The like a consortium of California community colleges. We are not going to cover that today because once you know about NJCAA, it's very similar and that's really less prominent. So we're just going to stick with this three divisions today: the NCAA, the NAIA, and the NJCAA. Okay. So NCAA is the biggest one, right? So you hear about NCAA everywhere. So this is the biggest governing body for tennis, and NCAA divides itself in three divisions: Division 1, 2, and 3. Okay. When I've been traveling in India, a lot of people think that it's like the Division 1 is the best in tennis, 2 is next, and 3. Like almost like, if you're looking at the English Premier League or La Liga or something like that, the 1 is the highest, 2, and then 3. That's not the case at all. Okay. So let me explain this. So how the divisions work is really the size of the university, the number of sports they have. There is a whole slew of criteria what decides what division a college or an university comes in. Okay. And we're going to interchange these terms, right? The college, university, or school. So they are basically exactly the same when we are talking about. So we don't need to get into the details of college versus university and school. They just used it kind of a slang calling both of them. Okay. So again, the main key part here is the Division 1, 2, and 3. It's not really based on the tennis criteria, but it's really more based on the size of the school, the number of sports, the total funding, and a slew of other factors. Okay. So that being said, Division 1 typically has the largest amount of sports, right? So they are the big budget programs. And then when you look at the elite programs in Division 1, the big names that you hear, that you watch the football games, right? Like the Alabamas, the Stanfords, the Michigans of the world. Obviously, they have more money, they have more glamour, and they generally recruit well, so the teams are better. Okay. But with that said, there are several colleges that are not as prominent and they have great teams, and I'm going to talk about that. Okay. So so just to keep that in mind, so Division 1 are the biggest, they have more money, they have the more sports, and they are the sort of the bigger consortium of colleges. Okay. Division 2 are generally smaller universities and colleges. They could be both private and public. And so in tennis in Division 2 also there are really, really good teams, right? Because a lot of them recruit foreigners, or actually most of them recruit foreigners heavily. So it's not uncommon to see Division 2 teams who have former players like ATP players in 750, 800 in the team, right? It's absolutely not uncommon. So again, don't get too locked in about the division, but just know that 1 and 2 can both be very competitive. It depends on the university, so you have to do your research a little bit on that. How they are structured. Okay. Division 3 is a little bit different. Division 3 does not offer any sports scholarships. So typically they are private universities, they're expensive schools, but they're more academic centered schools. Okay. So Division 3 is a little bit different. However, there are top Division 3 universities which have exceptionally good quality of tennis, right? So the players come in nowadays, they get into this Division 3, but they want to play like for example, like I know a lot of kids that have gone to Swarthmore, right? So it's a very elite college, but they got a very high UTR players that can compete with mid-major D1 colleges. So again, they don't give any academic scholarship and they're more academic focused. So that's sort of the difference between 3 versus 2 and 1 when you look at NCAA. So outside of NCAA, there is also another division called NAIA. So NAIA is a consortium of small colleges. So there are some NAIA colleges which are literally like they're full of professional players. And one is a legendary one called Georgia Gwinnett. If you look at Georgia Gwinnett roster over the years, I think they have not lost a match in 5 years or so. And the players are They routinely recruit, in their men's side between 700 and 1200, 1500 ATP players. The women's side have very strong team as well, so they are, you know probably at par with top D1 colleges that are top 10, 15 in the country, right? So these players have extensive experience playing futures, challengers, and all that. But Georgia Gunnett's not one, right? So there's several others in that as well. NAIA, it's got a little bit lax in their compliance. So what I mean by that is NCAA has very, very strict rules, and we're going to cover some of that as we go forward, about academics and when a player should sign in, and if they turn pro, what the requirements. NAI is a little bit more lax, so you have some players who are older players who decided to give it a shot at pro. They cannot be eligible for NCAA, and traditionally they have come to play NAIA. So that's sort of how NAIA works, and NAIA gives scholarships, both sports and academics and all that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the NJCAA, right? So NJCAA is 2-year colleges. So what it means is you come in, you do freshman and your sophomore year, and then you get an associate degree, but then you have to go find another university to go and do your junior and senior year. That's also a very, very viable path, right? These universities or these colleges are not as expensive, and some of them traditionally have very, very good team, right? Like, for example, I live in Texas. Tyler Junior College is the number one in NJCAA, right? If you look at their roster, they got phenomenal players, players who have pro experience, played high ITFs, played junior slams. They come to this type of colleges, they get better in 1 or 2 years, and then they land themselves in some really good, program, which is very, very competitive. So this is something also for you to keep in mind. Okay, so NJCAA is definitely a viable solution. And the last one that I said I'm not going to cover, which is the California, the consortium of colleges. And there's a college called College of the Desert, which has been very, very prominent over the years. The overall level has dropped down a little bit in that. And we know a lot of people who tried there. They have, like, especially foreigners, have visa problems and stuff. So we decided not to cover it in detail. But anyway, this sort of summarizes the whole division and the governing structure. How colleges are organized. Okay, so I want to move into the conferences, right? So the conferences, so this is all at the division level, right? So now the way it works for each of this division, whether you're looking at NCAA Division 1, 2, 3, or you're looking at NAIA or NJCAA, which has also 2 divisions within itself, there's generally a consortium of like 8 to 12, sometimes a little bit more, colleges or universities packed together, and that's called conferences. So you can think of this large big structure as the divisions, and then within that you have the smaller structure as the conferences. So the conference teams play against each other in the spring. In the fall, they generally all play tournaments, right? Like, so these are individual tournaments, and nowadays the structure has changed. Many coaches are allowing players to go and play 15Ks and 25Ks. Some of them are even skipping the fall tournaments, right? Because their players are just playing a professional schedule, or at least the top half of the lineup is doing that. The spring is what really matters in college tennis, right? Which is, it starts from January, and then it goes into April or May, right? And that's what really matters. That's what really matters, in this in the spring, as far as the tournaments are concerned. So all these colleges, they play with each other uh, in the spring, and then they move into something called, each conference has a conference championship. So typically that's really important for the college coaches. They want to be really good in the conference, and they want to do well in the conference championship so they can move on to the regionals, and hopefully from the regionals they move on to the nationals, right? So that's kind of the main core way the college works. You come through your conference, either you win the championships, or in some other way you move to the regionals, and then you go to the nationals, and you get to play either the NCAA nationals within your division, or the NAIA or the NJCAA nationals. So that's really, really critical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick pause here, because I got 3 more things to cover over here, and see if anybody have any questions over here. Okay. If anybody doesn't have any question, then I'm going to keep moving forward. Okay. So you're going to hear another thing as you research and learn about college is something called ITA, Intercollegiate Tennis Association. So ITA is a completely independent body. It's not like a division. It's none of these. So ITA's main rule is they work in consortium with all this, these governing bodies, right? Like NCAA, NAIA, NJCAA, and their job is to administer the tournaments and the dual matches. So they provide the rules for tennis. They basically provide those primarily the rules about how how the tournaments run. So they are in charge of the tournaments, and that's their only job, right? So they decide the rules of no let, or they decide like what the dual matches rules are, or how the fall tournaments are played, and so on. So you don't need to get too caught up with ITA. You just need to know kind of the role of ITA and what it does, right? For the spring is, and again, as far as the rules go, the spring are team events where teams play against each other. And then there's fall events are tournaments. And when the team events happen, so 6 players are in the lineup. So, in a men's side or a women's side, so there's, right, start off with 3 doubles. And then one team has to win 2 out of 3 doubles, okay, to get 1 point. So even if a team wins 3-0 all 3 matches in doubles, they don't get 3 points. They only get 1 point. Or they win 2-1, they get 1 point, right? So and then they go and play the singles, and and each singles counts for 1 point each, right? So that's how college tennis works. Lines 1 through 6. Okay, if you have more members in the team, so they are generally the backup, and sometimes they get switched around, but 6 singles players and then 3 lines of doubles. So that's pretty much it about the organization, about how the US college works overall. Okay, so again, I'm going to just pause here, and I think I got a question here, so I'm going to pause real quick, see the question, and I'm going to answer that. So there's a question from Jorge Alfaro to everyone, right? ITA making an exclusive deal with WTN. What's going to happen to UTR, and what do coaches look at most, right? So let's talk about that. We got a whole slide about UTR and WTN, I think, later in the thing, but we can talk about it, right? So what's the purpose of either of these, right? The UTR or WTN, or a rating. The purpose is for a coach to assess the quality of the player. Is the player going to make an impact in his or her team, and is the player good enough, and how's the player fits in within the conference, right? UTR has been pretty stable, at least in the US. There's probably within like a 20% plus minus margin, but fairly stable for the coaches. WTN, per my opinion, at this point, it's not as stable, right? Because they are working on a limited data set so far. So the pro data is, I believe, it's still not there in WTN. So if somebody's playing only 15-25 Ks, I don't think it's counted, at least the last I checked, right? They may have changed that, so it's not counted. It's taking the domestic results, like from USTA and different national federations and the ITF. But as far as till about couple weeks back, if you do an analysis with WTN and UTR is a little bit more stable. So it doesn't matter what ITA is doing. The college coaches have their own responsibilities to get the best team possible, right? So it's for their job, for their bonuses, things like that. So at this point, till WTN gets more structured, they are looking at UTR. And we talked to a lot of college coaches, and I do not know anybody at this point that's looking at WTN. Now, of course, that can change, right, as more data comes in and it becomes stable. But again, the rate, it's a rating, and but at this point, I would not probably get too caught up with the deal between ITA and WTN. Okay, any other questions?